Good morning, everybody, and welcome to your Monday morning kickstart. I hope you guys all had an incredible weekend, and let's get this week off to a flying start. So first off, news this week. Number one, on Thursday, 5:15 London time, we have an adverb clinic. And you might be looking at the timetable and saying, what on earth is an adverb clinic? Well, every month we put on bonus lessons for you guys, extra things on topics that you guys have either requested extra help with, or myself or Mary or Matthew have noticed in speaking sessions or in your writing that is a common struggle that people have. Now, adverbs and the use of adverbs was one of those areas that we found was quite tricky for a lot of people. Okay, so we've decided to run an adverb clinic for you, going through some of the most kind of common, most challenging issues that people have with adverbs. So if adverbs is something that you struggle with, head along to that clinic on Thursday at 5:15. Okay, we will record it, so don't worry if you can't go live. We will send you the recording over of that clinic. But if you want your chance to ask questions and get involved, I highly recommend joining live. So there won't be any study hall this week, as we've got the adverb clinic instead on the Thursday. Second bit of important news for this week is at the weekend, so on the 26th, on Sunday, the clocks are going backwards 1 hour. Now, for most of you in Europe, your clocks are going backwards 1 hour as well, so this is not going to affect you with the timing of the classes. However, if you are living in a country that doesn't change the clocks, just double check what time speaking sessions would be, okay? So we are going backwards 1 hour. Just go to Google and see what time the speaking sessions are, and that's going to solve that problem for you. Okay, moving on to my tips for this week. So today I want to give you some tips about listening, and how to kind of test yourself with your listening, and how to improve certain issues that you might have with listening. Okay, so at your level, at C1 level, you should be able to understand most authentic listening materials on a wide variety of topics. Okay. But that doesn't mean that you're going to understand absolutely everything, especially when you're listening to more colloquial or regional accents and varieties of English. So, for example, if you're listening to someone speaking from Newcastle, Liverpool, Glasgow, you're going to find these accents are very strong. And they could be tricky to understand, especially if people are using slang from where they are from, or even dialects. Then that's going to be very, very tricky to understand. And that's totally normal. Like, even for native speakers, if you're not from that area, you're going to find it really difficult to understand. For example, there's some TV programs that are shown in Scotland, Still Game, for example, which uses a lot of slang from Glasgow. And when this TV program is shown in England, it has to be shown with subtitles so that they can understand. Okay. Now, don't panic. In your exam, you're not going to be given a listening task with a very, very thick accent and loads of slang. Yes, you'll hear people with different accents, but they'll be using standard expressions. They'll be using common phrasal verbs and they'll be using relatively neutral pronunciation from those areas. So you're going to get a Scottish accent, but you're going to get Scottish accents like mine. You're not going to get those very, very strong accents, okay? You're going to get accents from Northern England, but you're not going to get a strong Liverpool or a Newcastle accent. These accents, Liverpool is called a Scouser accent, and a Newcastle accent is called a Geordie accent. You're not going to get these in the exam. So a good test for you is whether you can understand the news. So news programs are using that clear, neutral English that you'll see in the exam. But you can use the regional news TV programs. So for example, BBC News Scotland, they'll use someone with a Scottish accent, but it's going to be a neutral accent like mine. If you're looking at the BBC News from Northern England, it's going to be a more neutral accent, okay? So this is going to give you a good understanding of the different accents without all that kind of slang language. If you watch TV programs like Geordie Shore or The Only Way is Essex, these like Love Island, these reality TV shows, they use a huge amount of slang that you will not need to pass the exam. You will not need them to communicate in international business, okay? The only time that these are going to be essential for you is if you're going to move to the UK and you're going to move to a very specific part of the UK. So if you are moving to Newcastle, then I would get used to that Geordie accent. If you're moving to Glasgow, then you need to get used to that accent and learn some of that slang. But if you're not going to be living in those areas, then you do not need to learn the local slang. For example, if I was to start using the language where I'm from in Aberdeen, so we have a dialect. They debate whether it's a dialect or an actual language. But I have the dialect the dialect where I'm from is called Doric. This is the dialect. So our conversation would start, if I was speaking in Doric, like, all right, fit like, who's your dues? I nae bad chavinoa, which means, fit like, who's your dues means, hello, how are you? Nae bad chavinoa means, I'm fine, thanks. Completely different, okay? Anybody who is not from Aberdeen has absolutely no idea what that means. So you do not need to know what that means either, unless you're going to go to Aberdeen. You're never going to be tested on that in an exam. So this is the first thing that we need to think about, okay? Accents and also the speed that people are talking at. But as I said, listening to the news, the BBC News, if you can understand that, and that's them speaking at a normal speed, if you can understand that, then you're doing well. If you can't understand, it's not necessarily the speed or the accent. It's often about vocabulary. So if you don't know the words well, or you don't know the words at all, you can end up not understanding, because what we're doing is you're listening and then you hear a word that you're like, oh, I know that word. And you start looking for the meaning of that word in your head. And maybe it takes 2 or 3 seconds. And then by the time you remember that word, you've missed the rest of the sentence and now they're talking about something else and you're lost. So when an audio is quite fast and with lots of information, well, in those cases, if we don't have that word activated, if we don't know that word well, we're going to miss half the listening because we don't have time we can't press pause while we're looking for a word. In in normal life, in everyday speech. You can't pause the person while you think about what that word means, okay? So this is what often happens with listening, and this is why we get lost in a listening, okay? It's not because of your understanding, it's because the vocabulary is either new to you or it's not activated, so you have to search for that word, and then you miss big chunks of what the person is trying to say. So this passive knowledge is often not enough. You need to be able to recognize and use the vocabulary automatically, okay? This is true with grammar as well. For example, if you can't speak fluently with a third conditional, you'll also struggle a little bit when you're listening to it. You're going to waste time, you're going to waste energy trying to figure out the structure. And then you might miss the next thing that the person has to say. And you might be thinking about, oh my God, was that a second or was that a third conditional? Are they speaking about the past or are they speaking about the future or the present? And just doing that in your head, you've missed half of the next thing that the person wants to say. So from that, I want you to take that to build your listening skills. It's not just about listening. It's not just about listening more. You have to build everything else around it. You need to use new words and expressions when you're speaking and when you're writing so that you can activate them. You need to learn common grammar patterns, and you need to practice producing them quickly. Conditionals is a notorious one that people have issues with, that they can do grammar gap fills. They can do these until the cows come home. This is an expression that means you can do these like forever. You can do these no problem. No, I can do these gap fills until the cows come home. But when it comes to speaking, we still struggle to produce that language, which means it's not activated. Okay, so you need to push yourself to practice those regularly, to say those out loud, not just in your head, to say those out loud, to practice creating sentences with them until they become second nature to you. And once they're second nature to you, then that's going to help with your listening skills as well. It's going to help with everything. So don't just do exam tasks at random, okay? Like hundreds and hundreds of exam tasks. Always think about what the issue is, okay? Is the issue the vocabulary, or is the issue listening, or is the issue the exam task and the distractors? Okay, once you know what the big problem is, then you can fix that problem. This is why we put such a huge emphasis on activating your vocabulary in this course, and doing that through the speaking sessions, and studying vocabulary little and often, because it helps with every single part of the exam. Okay? Also remember that listening in an exam can feel harder than when you just watch TV or you listen to podcasts, because it's not just the language, but it's because of the exam pressure, and that you're trying to listen and answer questions at the same time. You're dealing with distractors. You're trying to stay focused while understanding. You're trying to make notes. You're trying to answer questions. That's why it's not just about the listening, it's about the exam technique too, okay? So if you're finding that you're like, I can watch TV and I understand everything, no problem, then your issue is most likely exam technique and getting used to doing those tasks at the same time, okay? If you're listening and you're not able to understand, then it's most likely a vocabulary problem, or that you know the vocabulary but it's not activated. So you're losing what they're saying because it's taking you too long to translate that word, okay? If when you are looking at tape scripts, you understand the vocabulary and everything, you kind of understand the theory of the technique, then perhaps it is the accent and the speed that you just need to get used to. And one thing that I found is very successful with a lot of students is to get used to this speed, is listening to the exam task, listening to it at 1.2 or 1.5 speed before you do the exam tasks, okay? Why am I telling you to speed it up when you're having problems with the speed? Should I not be telling you to slow it down? Here's what happens when we speed it up. So have you ever noticed when you're driving, if you're driving on a motorway at like 120 kilometers an hour, and then you go into a small village and you have to go down to like 20 kilometers an hour, it feels like you're driving at a snail's pace suddenly. This is because you've been going so fast, then 20 suddenly feels slower than 20. It feels like you could get out and walk faster than that. So the same thing can happen when you're listening. If you listen to something at a faster speed, like 1.5, or like, when you put your WhatsApp messages on fast speed, when you listen to it at that faster speed, then when you go and listen to it at normal speed, it's going to sound really slow for you. And this can really help your brain get used to that normal speed, because now it's like slow for you. So this is something that you can try before your next listening task. If you find that it's a bit too fast, play it before you do the listening task, play it at 1.5 speed, and then do the task afterwards at normal speed. Okay. And it's funny, I was in Bilbao at the weekend for a little mini break, and so the only TV in English was the Sky News, the 24-hour Sky News channel. So I was watching that. I don't normally watch the news because it's a bit depressing, but I was watching the news, and it was so funny because almost every second sentence that the people were saying, there was a bit of a debate on a political debate about something. The UK government and the budget and a football match, and anyway, not important. Every second sentence was one of our golden phrases that they were saying. So I loved it. I just heard, it's important that the government introduces measures to blah, blah, blah. The Prime Minister should take action to solve blah, blah, blah. All the time. All these phrases that we use constantly in our speaking sessions, these journalists and politicians were using constantly. So it just shows you that kind of like learning and practicing those and activating that kind of language is going to be extremely important for you, not just for your listening skills, not just for your passing the exam, but they are used in the real world all the time in the kind of more academic, more professional environments. Are you going to see those used when you're watching Celebrity Love Island or The Only Way is Essex? Not a chance. But you're going to see those all the time in more professional settings. So very, very important to know, learn, use and understand. Anyway, that is it for today. I hope you found this useful. If you want to discuss this more, tell me what your thoughts are. Tell me what your biggest takeaways were. Head over to the Telegram group and we can have a chat about it there. Okay, take care. See you soon.